Are we ready?
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Virtual Event Space here for the Summer Image Critique Series. Vincent Versace, the wizard himself, joining us once again. Vinny, what's up, man?
Oh, just getting ready to go to build, getting ready to go to Cuba, getting ready to go everywhere. So life is good.
That's great.
One of
That's
us.
great. I know you know, over the pandemic, you had a lot going on. So it's good to see you back, thriving, traveling, doing all that.
Yeah, it went from nothing to crazy. Then the flood hit. Hold on, I have to turn my phone off. Then the flood hit, and now I'm back online.
That's
So,
great.
hey,
And we get the benefit.
I want to say one thing. You people on the East Coast think you have this thing with hurricanes that you win. Oh God, you have hurricanes. We have hurricanes, and our hurricanes have earthquakes. So
You guys are on how are you guys doing out there? I mean, I saw it on the news, but I know
the desert got hit hard.
That's what I saw.
My God. Well, desert's just not, they received in 3 hours 1 year's worth of rain for the desert. And here it wasn't, it rained, but it wasn't like that wall of rain that we got in January, February, which my favorite statistic, which I got from the insurance broker, was that if you took the surface area of the state of California and flattened it out and made it one flat surface, you would be standing in 12 inches of water. That is how much water dropped on the state of California in a 6-week period of time. 1.5 trillion gallons.
Wow.
The drought, there ain't no drought. No.
Well, we send our best wishes to everyone out there in California. We know you guys get like if it were natural disasters, you guys have to deal with it all. So we send our wishes to anybody out there who has been dealing with that. And we're glad to see that this time around, I think at least you've been spared the flooding, right?
My studio held. So
all right, good.
I'm very happy about that. The studio held. There's one repair that I need to get finished on the final repair, but I just waited till September to do it. So other than that, I'm good. I hope. I hope. I don't want to go through another one of those.
We hope for you. Well, look, Vinny, I'm going to do what I do best, turn my camera off, move over to computer number 2, and I'm going to drive some images for you. We're going to see what submissions we have to go over this week, and we're going to let you do your thing.
Yay. Okie dokie. All righty. Nice shot, nice gesture. I'm a fan of black and white, as you know. Things that I would consider doing. On the right behind the main train, that area needs to be brought down a bit right there. Yep, because that's a little hot. Let's move over to the left side of the image. See where the number 18 is. In that area there, the lights on the train in the roundhouse right there, that needs to be toned down. I would see how much I could tone down those lights that have gone to 255 that are flaring, but that is a difficulty in that if you do it too much, you'll notice it, which means you would have to introduce grain in it to be able to make it match. A conversation with yourself has to be, what's the most important elements of the train, which is it the guy holding the lantern on the train and then the smoke behind him? Then what I would do is I would boost the contrast of the train and the guy a little bit more than the train, then the cloud behind the guy a little bit more than the rest of the background, so that it would be 1.8 0.2 on the guy, 1 on the train, and 0.8 on the fog, if you were looking at how subtle that differential needs to be. But that would be what I would do, and then I would darken up the sky a little bit so that the train itself pops out more, gives it more dimensionality. Next, train. I'm happy that it was a 1-second exposure handheld on a Rebel T6. That's great. You're a far steadier hand than I. Now this one here, I'm good for about 1/5 of a second, and after that I'm no good. So this here, I think, is an issue of resolution on the file sent. So what I'm going to ask to have happen with this image is to give me more resolution on the file and send it back, and I'll talk about it next week, and it'll be the first picture I talk about next week, okay? Because my issues with it are, yeah, this is an issue of resolution. Let's go to the next one, and I'll do that one next. All right. Can you give me zoom down a little bit so I can see the whole thing? It's off to my left. So if you could center it on my screen, keep going, keep going. No, so I mean, make it so that it's a whole image. Command 0.
Yeah, it's gonna be pull back out. You're still not able to see it. Is something blocked on your screen, Vinny?
Yeah, I don't know if you give me black around the whole image. There we go. So let me see the whole image. That's it. Okay. And then move it over to the right, because right now you're all the way to the left, to my left.
On preview, it's not going to let me move it.
What are you in? What's
preview? Just looking at them through preview. You have a window over it, or?
Well, no. What it is a third of it's cut off for me. Go back. There we go. Okay, I got it. No, zoom. Make it minus. There we go. Now get it back over to the right.
Any of these working for you?
No, it's like you're right.
Yeah, it's only going to center it.
All right. Let's try this. See if I can. Nope, that didn't work.
And Vinny, for the last image, old photo on film from 1957. So.
Okay, so all right, so that's not a resolution area. Let's go back to that one then. Then I can.
Okay.
And zoom back so I can see the whole thing. But again, you're off half. It's off to the left. I was seeing it before, so I'm not sure what is different.
Yeah, I don't know, because I have it centered on both of my screens here. I don't know if there's something in your view that's off.
Nope.
You run it by our producers and see if everybody is able to.
How about close your program, open it up, and then let's do it again. See if we can restart it, because right now you're over to the.
Let's see what we got.
There we go. Now you're centered.
All right.
Okay. And now you're still exactly the same problem that I have. Okay. That's weird. It didn't do that last week.
Yeah, is your view off? I think because we have it all on all of our computers.
Okay,
we're able to see
there we
it
go.
full.
I got it. All right. Nope. Now, so looking at this, that is nice framing. Nice gesture. The issue here is that I would darken the right-hand side where the number 311 is, because that, and I would darken the side where the no or number with the figure of a woman in a big dress is. I would do that, and then I would the steps going in that are lighter. I would lighten that lighter area up some, or darken that lighter area up some, because the important fact here is the gesture of what is going on with the individual in the picture. And so that needs to be pulled out a little bit more, and the elements of the image need to be toned down more. The speculars on the flower to the left that are hotter than the values around it, and on an equal value of the gentleman with the thumb going to his forehead. It's all about that. So every decision about that has to be made about that. And you have to decide, what do you want the eye to see first, second, and third? Because right now, what I see when I look at this guy is his socks first, and then everything else. So I need to reverse that and then make it so that all the other stuff that's in the picture are little Easter eggs of interest, so that you keep the viewer's eye by looking at the swan and the chairs and the way the window is and the pattern of the bricks and the pattern of the light, but it's always got to come back to the subject of that guy. So if it was in a dark room, you would probably print, if you're using variable contrast filters, you would print him at a higher contrast, that area, by dodging him in at a higher contrast or burning him in. And then at lower contrast filters, doing all the other work that you want to do, so that what would happen is that he would have an appearance of having a higher contrast. In Photoshop, you can mask it. And in the latest version of Photoshop Beta, you can really mask it, separate him out completely, and make it so you can't see it. Which brings us to a conversation about AI that I've been thinking about. We're all scared to death about AI, and though I believe we should be, and that eventually AI will be the death of all of us, it's not going to be the death of us now. AI is not really AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It's just a really, 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 really good algorithm that is capable of scraping the internet and putting together things at a level in which we can't look at, which are ones and zeros, to make better masks and all of that. So is it a tool? Yeah. Should we pay attention to it? Yeah. Is it going to replace some people? There are certain jobs that will get replaced, but there are other jobs that will get increased by it. Will it eventually kill us? Yes, it will eventually kill us, but not today. And it's a useful tool. And what I think we should do is master it as a useful tool and not abuse it like we did back in the day with HDR, where we made everything look like a Harry Potter set. It's now found balance and has become a tool again, and AI is a tool. So that said, let's move on. Nice sense of geometry needs a little bit more separation from its values. So this is a common theme, but I think it's a common theme that I have a lot in when I critique. So the things to look at are the don't stop or the stop symbols right here. Is that important to the image? If so, make a decision about it and either reinforce it or not. If it's not important and it's all about the stairway going up, then consider doing something with them other than having them be right there. Either you're going to bring notice to them or not, because what's happening is you're noticing them. The specular highlights in the back right over by the where the Hindu Arabic symbols are with the arrow, that needs to be toned down. I think the play is with the stairs and with the diagonal of the stairs behind it. So what I would do is I would selectively boost the contrast in those areas, with the primary stairs having the most amount of contrast sharpness, and then the secondary stairs having the secondary amount of contrast, so that my eye goes to that. Other than that, that's a nice graphic photograph. The geometrics are great. Next picture. Zoom me back, because that's you, not me. Ah, there we go. Nice gesture. Very, very, very nice gesture. Full frame. Love the expression of the gentleman behind playing the conga drum. Love the joy that the dancer is having. Love the whole thing. What again I would do is, she needs to be the most important, he needs to be the second most important thing, and then everything else is, you know, tertiary in the photograph. But nice gesture. That's what you're looking for when you're looking for a photograph that stops time. And I'm doing this presentation for Nikon at Build, breathtaking. And it's about discussing the concept of being able to capture moments that take your breath and how to record time. And one of the things that I've observed about it is that we all know how to do it, we just don't know how to apply it. So the next time you breathe in and then breathe out, the moment before you breathe back in again, that's called the equipoise of breath. And that's the moment in time that you're trying to capture, is that moment before from one state to another state. And when you're looking at a picture like this, what you're looking at is the equipoise of time, of the temporal apogee of a moment. There's obviously something that happened before, and she is on her way to what is going to be whatever the next thing is. And what you have with the gentleman behind is you have the spontaneous moment of the, oh, expletive, whoa, look on his face. So you have an absolute spontaneity, you have absolute truth. You can only be one way if you're spontaneous, and that's truthful. And what you're looking at is a photograph of an absolute spontaneous moment in which these two individuals have no awareness that they're being photographed. But if you look at the two individuals to the right, they are aware that this is being photographed. You can see it in the differential in the energy values between these two people. So the two that are the primaries of this photograph are completely oblivious to the fact that they're being photographed. They're in the absolute perfect moment of being in the moment. And the other two are observing the whole moment, aware that it's being photographed while they're watching that at the same time. You can see it in their energy. Now, one of the beauties of a photograph is that no matter how you look at the photograph, no matter where you are, when you look at the photograph, no matter what angle you look at the photograph, and no matter what time of day or how far away from when the photograph was taken, everybody that looks at it sees it exactly the same way. One of the interesting things about observation, about humanity, about the way we see things, is that we're all inertial observers. That everybody here, if we were looking at the same event, would all see the same event differently. And that has to do with our relationship to where we are when the event occurred. For example, if one of us was in a train, right in the middle of a train car, and one of us was standing on the train track, and right as the train car was passing, the person in the middle of the train turned on the light. The person in the middle of the train would observe light hitting the walls of the front and back at the same time. The person on the train track would observe the light hitting the back wall before it hit the front wall. Because of the way in which we are in relationship to the image, because we are inertial observers. What is unique about a photograph is that everybody sees it from the perspective of the photographer and the connection that the photographer had. And you're literally seeing time frozen, the echo of time frozen. And so with that, what makes this absolute plainness the most difficult thing to achieve, to quote Mies van der Rohe, is that you are seeing life. That's what happens. And when you look at this picture, what you're seeing is a moment of time that is going to be forever frozen. She's going to get older, he's going to get older, things are going to change. But in this moment, they are forever that. Another interesting thing about time, which I invite you all to consider, and about the way we do things, is you can do these reels on Insta, Snap, Twitter, X, Bookogram, chat, at all, social media, and you can put 15 photographs in 15 seconds. It's not a way to look at a picture, but you can go click, 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 and see it all that. Interesting thing about as you approach the speed of time versus approaching the speed of life, the closer you get to the speed of light, rather, the speed of light versus the speed of life, the closer you get to the speed of life, time changes to the point where if you hit the speed of light, time stops. So a star goes supernova, and it takes 30,000 years for that photon to hit us so we can see it. To us, it took 30,000 years. To the photon, it's still in the instant of it happening. It just happened for the photon. So the faster we move, the more we we remove ourselves from the ability to experience that which is important to us, that which it is compelling to us, and that which it is matters. This is a very successful photograph in that it captures the joy of just showing up in life. The random moment of that, walking there, deciding to dance. He's all amazed. It's all great. You can see the difference in energy and just that. Now, what would I do to make this better and different? It's the same set of discussions that I've had in several other pictures, like the one spot over here to the right, or to the left rather, where you have the two figures. There's a hot spot in the grass, which is probably some glitter. I would remove that. I would darken the background up a little bit. I would emphasize through contrast and sharpness what's going on with the dancer first and then the secondary gentleman behind. I would probably take out the word Tommy because I don't want to know that he's wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt. So I would make the O and the M and the T just be black. And the reason for that is my eye goes to a pattern that I recognize first. The pattern that I recognize first from light to dark is the T, O, and M in his shirt, which I then fill in the whole area, and that's pulling me away from what is going on, which is her and him, and then everything else. So if this is not photojournalism, which is I'm following the rules of engagement of recording history that's going in a newspaper, which is light and dark and up contrast, lower contrast, and remove censor schmutz. Those are the rules. If it isn't that, then I can make some aesthetic choices that will make this a more successful representation of the actual emotional experience that happens. Pablo Picasso said, art is the lie that tells the truth. And so am I lying by removing that? We could argue, but am I making it more truthful? Again, we could argue. I would argue that it becomes more truthful when I reduce those things that are of a technical nature based on the way in which cameras record and the way in which things are outputted. And what I'm trying to do is to bring that more into the balance of what it is like to experience, because our mind filters those things out. That was a lot on that one, wasn't it?
Wow. I had to double check. I'm like, wait, did I miss something? Did we move on to another picture? I'm like, I think you're ready,
picture.
right? You ready for another one?
Yeah, I'm ready for another one. That's a good picture. And person should be proud of that picture. Are you zoomed all the way out before I go ranting? Yeah, I thought so. A little bit more. Okay, that's what I needed to see. All right. First thing, straighten out the lines. You see how there is a bend on the line on the top part of where the dumplings are? So that goes on an angle. So what I would do in Photoshop, I know that evil piece of software, Photoshop, is I would make the lines, the parallel lines straight. And in making all the parallel lines straight, everything will fall into place. That's using the Scheimpflug principle. I love the fact that, and it's become both a sorrow and I photograph it to make a point, mirroring of the gesture of the two people on their devices with the person to the right in the dumpling stand folding dumplings. So you have the same sort of gesture with the hands going on in two places. Old school, new school. Oblivious to what's going on, completely caught and oblivious to what's going on outside them, both focused on the task. One is, playing the next game of Candy Crunch or reading whatever gossip text they're reading, and the other is making a good dumpling. So that's interesting. There's a story there. Straighten out the lines. The reflections are where the play in this image is as well. So I would focus on the two individuals or the three individuals, the two people to the left and the one person in there. Those would be what I would amplify. I would tone down the reflection of the white jacketed person that is almost in the middle a little bit. Right, here I am pointing with my pen. Go over a little bit, right there. That's got to come down a bit hair. And then I would start, and the rectangle that's up there, I would tone that down to right above him, right there. And then the rest of these reflections, I would spend some time playing with to see how I track the eye, because you have another face over to the left between, right there. That needs to be played with. There's something fun going on with the umbrella. That needs to be played with, and you could by playing with contrast and lightness and darkness, you could get all sorts of depth where the reflection goes back further into the picture, and these two stand out more. You could make this really, really deep. Again, we get back to Mies van der Rohe. An interesting plainness is the most difficult thing to achieve. People walk by this and they fail to see it, even though it's right in front of them. And so they're moving faster than the speed of life. You're a photographer. Your job is to move at the speed of life, and then to be able to learn how to engage in tachopsychia, which is the ability to slow down the experience of time while living life. And when you can get to that point, when you can get into the point where you can see it happening and then slow yourself down to be able to record the moments, that's where that sensation of understanding the moment before you breathe, the moment after you breathe, that moment in between, or the moment after you exhale just before you inhale, that moment of equipoise. Your heart does it too. There are 4 parts to the heart: 1, 2, 3, 4. So when it hits 4 before it goes to 1, that's called cardio equipoise. And it is that moment. We do it, 60 beats a minute to 80 beats a minute. We do it with every breath. We know what that sensation feels like. And the most successful photographs are the ones that echo the sensation of equipoise, the equipoise of time. This is another good example. Wow, back-to-back good examples. That's great. Now, getting back to technical, I'd remove some of, but not, I wouldn't remove all the schmutz on that pole, but I would darken it down so it doesn't pull. Because I think part of what makes this thing work is the amount of grunge that's in it. It needs a little bit more slicio life stuff to it. It's just that I would remove the hot spots and stuff so that I'm not pulled while looking at it. Next picture. Zoom out, please. An Ernst Haas photograph of motion. Okay, he needs to be isolated out more. His colors need to be saturated more, and the foreground a little bit darker. That streak of light and needs to come down a bit right behind him in the alleyway. The Dutch tilt works, or Swedish tilt, depends on how you learned how to do that. It's a nice shot, nice gesture. It's a nice piece of wall art. And I don't say that in a derogatory manner. This sort of stuff sells because it's more graphic in nature and yet shows something. Where would that go? I could see it in a restaurant downtown. I could see it in a clothing store. I could see it in a lot of places. It's a nice picture. It's the gesture of it's well seen. There's enough elements in it that are of tight focus so that all of the blur elements work in its motion and in its gesture. The only thing I would do is determine what's the story I want to tell, and then enhance those areas of the picture and then diminish the lightness of the areas that I don't want pulling from the picture. Next one. Zoom out, there we go. Nice lines. What I would do in post to make this a bit more, oh, that's the weirdest thing. Derek, you have a bug in your monitor.
A bug on my monitor?
In your monitor.
In my monitor?
Somewhere. Look in the left-hand corner. There's a bug. I've watched this bug move across the screen that I'm looking at. Not in my monitor. So what I would do here is in post if this is raw, create one stop under and two stops under, and so that you can get more of the detail in the center part of the cloud, which I believe exists in that picture. I can look at it. You're not quite blown out, which means that the file contains more data. So you can get that central part of the cloud more in focus. I would want to bring that out. The geometry is great, and I really am a fan of that. The unfortunate thing about this shot is that what could make this successful, there's not a snowball's chance in hell you would ever be able to do, which is to take multiple photographs of the same thing so all the cars would move. So you could have areas where you could remove cars. But since this is from a moving car, you're not going to get to do that. And since this is on a moving bridge during traffic with no place to stand, it would be good luck with that. But in an ideal and perfect world, you can take multiple pictures of things and make it so that it looks like there's no cars on the bridge. Not that that matters, in the sense of you can't do that here. So the issue then becomes, what is the story that you're trying to tell about all the cars in the bridge? Are you trying to tell the story about the geometry in the bridge, in which case either frame out or crop out the cars, or diminish the brightness of the lead cars, and make it so that it's all about what's going on in the clouds and the sky by increasing the contrast, putting some detail in the center part of the clouds, and then forcing your eye to that, but making sure that you have detail in the clouds. The issue here is that you're approaching 255, and I can tell by looking at this file that there's information in that file that can be extracted. Next picture. Spaghetti and meatballs, huh? You know, I make the best meatballs in the world. I'm just going to let that sit there.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
I have my great grandfather's frying pan from Italy. That's only used to make meatballs. All right. In an ideal world, the lead meatballs out of focus and the three meatballs in the back are more in focus. You can do this even handheld. I would have taken a picture of the lead meatball and I would have taken a picture of the back meatball, and then I can line them up in Photoshop with auto align, and it will line them right up. And then I can have an in focus meatball and focus meatballs in the back. If I had to pick between the two, meatball in the front or meatballs in the back, meatball in front is more important than meatballs in the back. And the reason for that is out of focus objects, 98 times out of 100 don't look right to us. There's not a rightness. It's very rare where having the blur object in the front pulling to the in focus object in the back makes for a successful image. We believe that things in focus are closest to us, and we want to see those things in focus, particularly if you're doing a food shot. I would come in a little tighter in my framing, which means that this is probably better served as a horizontal, not a vertical, because the background is distracting from the meatballs itself. And the whole subject of the photograph are meatballs on top of sauce on top of spaghetti with Parmesan cheese. So those would be what I would reinforce. And if you were to crop down past the green trees, the red background and the gray background make a nice graphic background to the image. So this would be better served as a horizontal. It would be better served if the lead meatball was in focus, and that's all easy enough to do. Next picture. That's another nice shot. Wow, look at all the surveillance cameras. Okay, this is a shot in which what I would do in post is I would make one stop lighter, one at N, and then one to two stops darker, and then in HDR software assemble them and then paint in the parts and pieces that I want. Because the sunset would be better served if it was more sunset. the subjects in the front, which are just about right where you want them tonally, would be better served if there was more detail to be pulled out of them and the ability to have a little bit more depth and potentially just a touch more lightness, particularly in the second person. So if we go with the woman in front, then there's a dark shirt, then a light shirt, and then all in white. I'm talking about the one in the dark shirt. That person needs to come out just a hair. In an ideal world, backing the lights that are on the posts a little bit would be nice. Depending on what your commentary is it all about that there are security cameras everywhere, no matter where you go, then leave the cameras in. If not, you know, if it's a piece of art that's trying to show off the slice of life of this area, then consider doing something with them, but that's a personal choice. The hot area to the right of the minaret, that is the hot, yeah, right there. That's the hottest area in there. That needs to come down, and the saturations of the color of the clouds would be nicer if they were the saturation was boosted. That all could be accomplished by using one file to produce an XDR file in which you can, or an HDR file rather, in which you can just use light pieces of it. That's what HDR was meant for, that you can use it to open up or knock down highlights and shadows. It's a lot easier to push ink into a paper than it is to pull ink out of paper. It's a good hiccup. As a general rule of thumb. And so what HDR affords you the ability of is to be able to do just that, to selectively push ink into the areas that you need to and leave ink be where it is when you don't want to. And this is a nice, I like the gesture of it. I like the motion of it, the angle of it, the framing of it. It's nicely done. Next picture. I hope that's not planned. That would be great if it wasn't planned. That's funny. That's funny. I would straighten up the lines. That's the big thing with this one. Straighten up the lines, maybe boost the saturation of the shirt a little bit. That's a hoot. There's not much to say about it other than to consider, unless it looks like there's some bend in that. It could be that the windows are on an angle. The line that I would think that needs to be straightened up the most, if we look at the two lines, is the background floor line. That line seems to be some level of bend due to angle and lens that could be corrected. Okay, next one. That's sweet. I would diminish the luminance of the background some. I would boost the contrast and saturation of the child with the pacifier some. I would bring down the reflection in the windshield some, so that it all becomes about that girl. Now, this is a suggestion for the next time you find yourself in situations like that. I always work a scene, which means that I always take the picture that takes me. So this is the picture that, let's just say this is my picture. So I'm going to speak in terms of this being my picture. This would be the picture that took me. I would take that frame. And the minute I've got the frame that took me, like, oh, wow, whoa. At that moment, I start working it. How many different ways can I reframe it? Can I move in tight? Can I pull back? You know, how fast can I shoot the same thing before I'm busted by the subjects? So if we were to come in a little tighter, that would be even more successful and frame out the whatever the words are to the right that starts with A, C, Q, E, D, O, T, T, O, all of that. If I could come in a little tighter without cropping it in post, that would even be a more powerful photograph because I would have maximum use of the acreage of my sensor. Here is a thing I invite you to consider. So you bought a 45 megapixel camera, did you? You have 45 megapixel and you shoot a picture. And you decide that really what you wanted is tighter in that picture. So you crop out, let's say 50% of the picture. So you get it so that it's tighter and it's perfectly cropped. So how much did you spend again for a 22.5 megapixel camera? Compose full frame. The acreage that you have to work with is the acreage of the sensor. Maximize that acreage and let the rectangle at point of capture be that which it is you try to fill correctly, so that there is no way to logically crop your image. And yes, sometimes you have to crop because you can't get rid of the turnbuckle no matter how hard you try, or the lens doesn't reach as far as you wish it could. And you are only as good as what you have right on your camera right there in the moment. And sometimes, yeah, I needed 400 millimeters, but all I have is 2. Well, there you go. And that's okay, but you make it a game where the goal is, how can I get it so that I've completely utilized all aspects of the frame? This framing is nice, don't get me wrong. This is nice use of graphics, nice use of line movement, nice use of edge detail. But I would also have liked to have seen, and if this exists, please submit that photograph, zooming in tighter. I'm just inviting you to consider, take the picture that takes you, then work the scene to see if you can get as many other pictures as possible, because frequently you will find that if you go further down that rabbit hole, there's gold in the Nar Hills, and that gold makes itself available. Next image. Nice shot. That's a nice shot. I just want to make sure I'm clear about that. Sometimes I feel like I rip pictures apart, and I don't mean to sound like this is that, and that's like, so far I have not been disappointed by any of them. They're all nice pictures. On this one, the foreground needs to be toned down, and we need to do something about the sun behind the bridge, and we need to bring up the colors. And the neutral blue, I'd like to see a little bit more out of it. Those are the things that I think are important. The background, the bridge needs to be brought out with contrast, so it stands out. The light that's in the foreground on the concrete, whatever you want to call that, pier extension into the water. We need to discuss do I see that first, then the bridge? Do I see the bridge, then that? And so that's a discussion that I frequently will do both to see which one I like better. And I won't know which one I like better until I've done it. And it's simple enough. You just use opacity to tone one up or tone one down. Diminish the buildings on the back, because right now the buildings are pulling my eye to the middle right. Next picture. I was wondering when we were going to finally get to this one. Only in that, when I was putting it together, it would come up in unique places. That is a nice use of color and absence of color. I would push the color of the whatever that is a little bit more. I'd make that more blue. I'd increase its contrast a hair, and that's pretty much all it needs to be done to it. Maybe straighten out the line because it's a little bit of an angle on the window, so make that so that it's more square. And once that's done, that's a nice picture, just a nice piece of art. Next picture. Perfect. There is banding in this image. And I'm not sure what's causing that banding. What I would do is I would use noise software to diminish it some, and I would also darken it a bit. So I'd push some ink into the paper, which would take care of that. The subject that matters are the three lights on the lighthouse. And so that then becomes what I would focus on. So if the background's a little lighter, or a little darker rather, and that's boosted contrast-wise to the lighthouse, and leaving the lights go to 250, 255, which is what they're looking like they're going to, that's perfectly fine. The light to the bottom right of the lighthouse, that, however, needs to go. So if you go all the way down, so keep going, you're in the right area, to the right there. That needs to go. All the rest of that, they need to be toned down some, but that one needs to go away so that it becomes all about that lighthouse and all about the geometry of the two rounds with that curved rectangle. I would take down the foreground grass some and the grass behind the foreground grass some so that it's a bit darker, so that it's there and I can see it and all, but it's a little bit more diminished. I want everything to be about that bridge or about that lighthouse. And to address the issues of the banding, you could blur the sky, take care of that, introduce monochromatic Gaussian blur, monochromatic noise Gaussian blur.
Vinny, I'm going to zoom it in. We had a question on banding. So while you go into what banding is, I'm going to do my best to give them a better look at the banding in the sky.
Okay, zoom, buddy. Yeah, you see where it's like, it could be that the file is being opened up more than it wants to be opened up past the 2.5 stops of dynamic range. And so what you have is you have a series of lines. It could be that linear versus nonlinear, digital versus optical, in that digital really does not like blur. And so what digital tries to do is it tries to linearize blur, which is random. And so I'm looking at and I'm seeing these lines going across it. And the ways to break that up is using monochromatic noise at about 3 to 4%. And you introduce noise. And I know that sounds like, what? Like all files have noise. There's no such thing as a non-noise file. It's just how fine the grain is. And so by putting in some monochromatic noise, what happens is you break up the computer wanting to linearize and make it look like a topographical map, which is what banding is. You put enough scatter in it that it doesn't do that. It doesn't have to be a lot, but that's what it is you need. But it looks like what's going on here, from what I can tell, is that there's banding occurring in that file. There are lots of reasons for it. I'm just giving you some of them. All right, move on. Zoom back. Keep zooming. There we go. That's a nice graphic. It would be served if it had actually a little more contrast, and I think the background was a little lighter. So all of the subject elements in it were harder and in contrast and a little darker, and that the background was a little lighter. That's a nice piece of wall art. That's something that you would put on your wall. I learned this lesson the hard way. I used to think I was, the second coming of photography, and then my brother sat me down because I couldn't understand why I wasn't making it as a fine art photographer. And he said to me, and that's when I was in Hollywood just doing nothing but headshots. And I thought every portrait was, I'm the next Michelangelo, Da Vinci of photography. And he's like going, Vin, nobody puts pictures of people on the wall they don't know. And this was such a wow. And it's like, well, what do they put on the wall? They put on things that they like to look at that are pleasant. This is pleasant. This is pleasing. This is nice. It's geometric. There's something that you can look at this over and over and over again. Whereas looking, unless it's, like I'm a fan of Miles Davis, he's my favorite jazz musician, and my mentor took the cover of the album Kind of Blue, and I have that in the room that I'm sitting in, and I love looking at that picture because I can just imagine what it was like to be there. Unless it's something like that, most of the time people don't like pictures of people they don't know. So something like this becomes interesting, becomes a nice piece of break up a flat plane, becomes pretty. The beauty of black and white over color when it comes to selling it is, if you think about it, when was the last time you changed the furniture in your house? Okay, so people tend to buy pictures that match the carpet and the drapes. And I watched this happen in the store where people were arguing over 8 pictures, 2 of which were mine, and they were trying to see if they would mine match the carpet. And what I realized is that that's how people buy pictures. They pay attention to the color palette of what's selling that year, and that's what you sell pictures to. The other thing is that gray goes with everything. So my black and whites tend to sell more than my color because gray goes with everything. And the artwork that people buy tend to be the artwork that sticks and stays until they redo their house. But again, getting back to this is a nice use of blur, and it's a nice use of tonal values, and it's just a nice geometry. Next picture. We're in my world now. So this looks like it's a more than one picture shot. When I do these, there's a technique that I invented that camera manufacturers put me out of business teaching, and I'm okay with it, which I used to call EXDR photography, and that was extending the dynamic range of photographs. And I would do image harvesting, and I had all these fancy terms for it. And now cameras have, I can speak for the Nikon metaphor, and I'm sure others do this as well. Nikon has a function, I know that Fuji does it. Nikon has a functionality called focus shift. And what I can do is I can set the camera up, and using the edge detail functionality where you can get it so that it will give me a red or a blue and tell me where the edges are. I find where the absolute closest thing to the camera is, make that my focus point, then program the camera up. You can program up to 100 or up to 300 slices, 300 photographs. And then I have the camera take, in this instance, you probably do about 150 photographs, and the camera will just move the lens all the way across the flower. So what will happen is I can decide, do I want the foreground water droplet to be in focus? Which I think that the tip of that water droplet would be really cool if that was in focus. And I think that the droplets underneath to the right of those leaves, those are really interesting. The one thing you have to be careful of if you're using a water bottle to get water droplets is that water bottles, if you do that, tend to have a uniformity to their droplet size. So when you go to spray a flower, spray it at different heights around it and different angles so that you can get different shapes to the water droplet. Because when it rains, there's a greater randomness to it. And that's just a side note. Now getting back to the foreground water droplet, I would love to have more definition on that back edge of it. And I would love to be able to see what's going on in it. That to me is of interest. That's where, because of the way the image is set up, that's where the eye is being told to go. But because of the way the structure in the picture is, my eye is going off to the right. So it would even be a more powerful more three-dimensional image if that lead big drop of water was really, right there. Now, with regard to the background and stuff, I would boost the purple values some. I would darken the yellow values up in the left-hand corner some, so that it's really all about what's going on here. And the elements that are blurry, I would take those down a bit so that these water droplet structures really, really stand out. I think that as I look at this, I would love to see all of those water droplets. Those to me, that whole area over there, all just, that to me would be way, 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 way fun to look at. But it's from a framing composition, use of negative and positive space, complementary colors, and all of that, that's really nicely done. I mean, the way in which you have negative space, you're breaking a couple of really huge rules of composition. And let me explain to you how absolutely, utterly senseless those huge rules of composition are. The rules of composition say that we read left to right, top to bottom. So the most powerful part of a photograph is the lower right-hand corner, and this does not follow Grecian mean. So, and it does not follow, the spiral of perfection or whatever the hell that is. All of that is nonsense. It's all nonsense. It's a bunch of old guys sitting around a table talking about a bunch of dead old guys and what they were thinking when the picture was taken, and they came up with some tendencies. The reason why this works is you're not following that rule. The subject, the most important part of the photograph, according to those rules in this photograph, is in the least powerful position according to the rules of composition. And yet, this is a powerful photograph because of the way it uses color and structure. Doesn't follow any rule. We read left to right, top to bottom. So we should be in the lower right-hand corner. Lower right-hand corner is negative space. The lower left-hand side of the picture is positive space. So you tell me. This is a lovely picture. I think this works well. The elements that I would like to see different are just those. I'd like to see more of the bubbles of water. Next picture.
And this will be our final picture coming up.
Okay, final picture coming up. And zoom back because you can give me a little more. All right. Okay. I think that the door needs to be toned down in brightness. The little girl in contrast needs to be brought up. The side elements of the wall, the granular parts of the walls need to be darkened down the most, then the elements of the walls going in second most, so that what happens is those force my eye into the circular part with the waterfall with the little girl looking at it. Everything is about that story, and this is all about the sensation of feeling like I am looking at something that she doesn't know she's being watched, that I'm a sneaky observer, not sneaky in the ooh, you're sneaky, but sneaky in the sense of there's no awareness that I'm photographing this moment of all aloneness, which is sweet. And so I would play up those elements, and some of the stuff has to be diminished down, like the door is brighter than her. Those side walls need to force the eye there. Contrast needs to be put on the girl because the little girl is looking at the water fountain. So you need to establish that relationship. The background needs to be darkened in a way in which there is a layerness to it so that you get the sense of dimensionality. Okay, that's all I got to say on that one. So
jump back on here. Another week of critiques. You're in the zone, man.
I enjoy doing these. They're fun. It's nice to look at other people's work other than my work. So, because I'm always, I look at the same stuff all the time. Kind of get bored with my own pictures. But
a break.
Yeah, it's nice. I love being able to see. I love looking at pictures. Nothing makes my day more. And I hope that I am of some service and help.
I think you are. And I think all of our viewers would agree. We had a couple comments come in thanking you for critiquing their photos. And we have more to critique, a couple more weeks of critique coming up. Of course, before we will be seeing Vinny live in person out here on the Javits floor and wandering the streets adjacent to Javits. Some photo walks he's doing with Nikon at the upcoming Build Expo. So
Yeah.
we will look forward to seeing you then, Vinny. I
So
will
you think
not.
about it. I'm going to go, if it's build, right? And we're going to do a walkabout. Would that be a build out?
I wish I could. I wish I had my sound effects here. But on that note, I will miss you next week. I will be down in New Orleans.
Rub it
But
in.
I'll try to tune in while I'm eating some gumbo. Maybe I'll submit one of my images next week since I'm not technically working.
Have some etouffee too.
I'm gonna write that down.
I'm a fan of etouffee. I don't know if you can get it anymore because I think it was mostly fished out. But if they do blackened redfish, blackened anything, any fish except tilapia, because I would argue tilapia is not a fish. But yeah, blackened snapper, blackened redfish. Those are just lovely, lovely
I'm
fish.
on it.
Yeah,
I will. I'll keep you posted on my travels, on my food excursions while down there, and to all of our viewers, keep sending those images in. We'll keep critiquing them, and we're never going to run out of critiques. So if you guys get images and we don't get to them here, they are being banked for future critiques. So keep that in mind when sending your images. And that's all we have for now. A wonderful another session by the wizard himself, Vincent Versace. A huge thank you to him for joining us for this 4 weeks of critiques. And to all of our viewers out there submitting images and tuning in for the critiques themselves, we thank you as well. But alas, another round of the B&H virtual event space now in the books. Catch y'all next time.
sayonara.